Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm using a different computer in a different office today, and as a result, the administrator actually has this so that let me go ahead and bit the two here. Get started again with this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and repeat what I just started, but generally I'm at a different location where I normally do my recordings, and unfortunately, the uh, network administrator here, somehow I can't live stream this to YouTube. But I am recording it, so it should be available to everyone as a result. Anyway, just a little bit more delayed. Reminder for the students who are here, this is going to be posted to YouTube anyway, even though it's not being streamed right now. So please limit any interactions with me to that of a public nature. Do not reveal any of your personal grades or anything that is related to you personally. Only give me information, questions, etc., of a general nature, unless you are just be aware that this is going to be published for everyone else to see. Okay, I'm going to pivot now to talking about the exam just a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over for questions. As I said on the announcement earlier this week, these are not Zoom classes in the sense that there will never be any new material presented during a Zoom class. It is designed to be a refresher, to maybe give you some tips, to certainly answer any questions that you have relative to the material that you're studying. It's sort of almost a little safeguard for you, a little security blanket, perhaps that you can give your instructor a question and he can respond to it. Uh, if you have any questions that you'd like for me to cover and you can't make this live, please just email it to me, or I may open up a uh, discussion board on Canvas for you to post those kind of questions. But I guess the point here is that I'm going to cover what you'd like for me to cover and a few other things, and that really is going to be just about it. Now let me go ahead and I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you don't have to look at me the whole time, at least entirely. Okay, what I have here is just the schedule, just a reminder that the course syllabus and then the schedule, it has not changed. It may, but it probably won't. We have exam two coming up next Wednesday in 5 days. It will be covering torts and other negligence issues, the material that you began immediately after the first exam and immediately after Lebec versus McDonald's. And it will cover consumer protection law. So it will cover both of those activities. All right. Now let me pull up. I do have as soon as I can find it, I do have, there we go. Move this out of the way. Zoom notes. And here we go. I know that this is going to be something that you can't read. I'm going to redo this. I had one of the student suggestions last year was, can you please type this, or at least make it so that we can read it. Um, it's really kind of for me to keep on track, but I'll take that into account. Try to do a better job for it in the future. For the torts law, be able to know and apply the principles of tort law, assumption of the risk, contributory negligence, comparative negligence. We've already talked about that. And law builds on itself. Anything that we cover on day one through the end of the semester is fair game for purposes of just check and see. We can't see the notes. You can't see the notes. Okay. Weird. What do you see on your screen? Do you just see me? Let me see what. All right, here we go. Here we go. Now let's see if you can see it. You probably can't read it even if you can see it, but I'd like for you to be able to see it as well. Uh, okay, good, good. All right. So we've talked about contributory negligence. We've talked about comparative negligence. And what I was saying is for purposes of exams, everything is fair game. The syllabus is fair game. I'm probably going to put a question or two on the next exam about the syllabus. I really am um, passionate about the fact that students need to pay attention to detail in this class. Last exam, there was a question about 158 degrees, and it was referenced in the materials about the McDonald's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, changed the temperature at which they were serving their coffee to 158 degrees after the McDonald's coffee cup case. It was just, I'm not going to say it was hidden there, but it was a detail that probably some of you thought was unimportant. Law is about detail. What you think is unimportant becomes important. So I'm going to be a stickler for that. Read all the material, all the questions, and all the answers will come from the materials that I present, which again, another reminder just from grading purposes, do not give me an AI generated answer or a response that appears like an AI generated answer. I don't care if it is or not. If you just happen to type like that and you research the things outside of the class materials, you're not going to get credit. It needs to come from my materials. A lot of reasons for that. It's because I'm shaping the way that you're learning through my materials, and it can be thwarted if you're looking at other kind of things. You think about things on the exam like defamation requirements. What are those requirements? What proof is required to establish that a defamation case exists? Are there exceptions to that? And law is about exceptions. So, yeah, there will be exceptions. Um, Res ipsa loquitur, intentional versus unintentional torts, negligence. All those things will be covered in the torts section. We addressed some of them a little bit. You've been introduced to some of them a little bit, and these materials by now you should have some familiarity with it. Will enhance what you have already learned. Um, the bottom of the screen there talks about an invitee, licensee, and trespasser. Uh, I really like asking questions about that. The owner occupier of land has a duty to individuals, but that duty varies. It's different. It depends on why you're on the property. If you're on the property as a business invitee or an invitee, you have a certain um, there are certain duties that flow to you because of your status as that invitee. If you're on as a licensee, then you have different duties that flow to you from the owner of that property. And if you're a trespasser, believe it or not, there's still some duties, they're less, but some duties that flow to you from the owner as well. And so, be aware of that, be thinking that through, and don't think like a layperson on some of these. Some of these things you may think, well, that doesn't make sense, or that's not fair. Fairness has very little to do with the law, very little to do with the law. Know what the law is and apply the law with that. Um, what kind of damages are recoverable? Make sure that you know. We've studied compensatory and punitive damages already. Most of you did a good job of uh, getting that right. You knew that Ms. Lebec was awarded $2.7 million by the jury initially, not to compensate her for her harm. Nope, but to punish McDonald's and to deter McDonald's and others like McDonald's from engaging in similar conduct in the future. It had a different purpose for that. It's important for you to know not only what happened, but why that happened and why that was done. One of the areas that's very difficult is is fraud. And fraud, it's difficult because there's certain elements of fraud that are common. You have to have a misrepresentation that was intentional, designed to mislead, and actually did mislead to the person to the detriment of that person. That's basically the four requirements that are common in all 50 states. The problem is that different states have a different reliance standard. The person, the victim, had to have relied on that misrepresentation to their detriment. Well, reliance can be either justified or reasonable. And those are two different standards that apply: reasonable reliance and justifiable reliance. Um, in general, just way overblown, way too general, but a uh, justifiable reliance is a broader, more expansive standard than reasonable reliance. Justifiable reliance jurisdictions tend to favor the victim a little more than reasonable reliance jurisdictions. And I'm not going to try to teach the whole thing here because you have that material provided for you uh, on the other on the underlying materials. Let me go ahead and scroll this over because I don't want to accidentally reveal some client things actually that would not have. Okay. Anyway, that's about the information I have on torts. I'm looking for my consumer law. There we go. I'll pull that back over. Again, I apologize for my horrible handwriting. I get it. It is horrible. Um, Consumer protection law is, and we mainly focus on federal consumer protection law. I'd like to talk about the Alabama Deceptive Trade Practices Act, but there's just not enough time, and you cover enough material as well, because I think that actually does provide some protection for Alabama consumers. But generally, in the area of consumer protection law, people are given the benefit of what is a greater protection, either federal law or state law for them. And for most purposes, federal law is generally better in our state than our state laws. If you go to some different states, such as California, their state consumer protection laws are typically stronger and more protective of a consumer than the federal laws. But we're just going to focus on federal laws, and if there are state laws that are more protective, generally they follow the same kind of thing. So if you learn this, you'll be able to apply it for a different state as well. Uh, we'll talk about fraud, which again you've the torts section included a lot of information on fraud, puffery, bait and switch, Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or otherwise known as the Junk Fax Act. Um, I have a special place in my heart for the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And so I talk a lot about that. It's not as protective of a law as some might think that it is, but there are some class actions that protect or that deter third-party debt collectors from engaging in conduct that would violate that because they don't want to get hit with a class action type lawsuit. I've been involved in about 5 of those. So that's why it has a special place in my heart. And as a result, partially, I'll make sure that I'll test you on that. Have not written the test, by the way. Haven't not the first question, so I don't know what's on the test, but I'm thinking about it as I'm going through these materials. Um, in the FDCPA, make sure you know what the elements are. The elements are critical. Is this an individual or is it a business? It has to be a consumer law at a consumer purchase at issue, not a business purchase. Can't be a business debt. It's got to be a consumer debt. Um, just because somebody did something bad doesn't mean they violated this law. Maybe they violated another law. Maybe they violated no law. What's important is if I ask you an FDCPA question, you make sure you answer with an FDCPA answer, whether or not they violated that. It's got to be a third party debt collector. It can't be the creditor themselves collecting their own debt. It may look like a FDCPA violation if they're doing it, but it won't be because the elements aren't met. You have to make sure that the elements are met. Um, what if they call somebody at work and they don't like it? Is that a violation, or does something else have to happen first for that to be a violation? What kind of damages can you recover for a violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act? Can you get $1 million in punitive damages? Can you get $2.7 million or 2 days worth of coffee sales for McDonald's if they violate the FDCPA? What can you get? Attorney's fees? Why is that important? Be thinking about things like that too. Why is it important? FDCPA does allow for attorney's fees. Why is that important? Well, I'll tell you why it's important. How many people are going to be able to afford to hire an attorney to go protect their rights if they're being harassed under the FDCPA with obvious violations? How many people are going to be able to hire an attorney for X $100 per hour for X hundred hours if they're just getting harassing telephone calls at home and nasty letters and things like that? How many people are going to be able to do it? Well, very few. And the value might not be worth it to that person, even if they could. And it might be 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. I've seen a case where $100,000 of attorney's fees in a single case were $100,000 were incurred. Well, the FDCPA says, look, if you win your case, you get attorney's fees. So your attorney can submit a fee application to the court and make the defendant pay. So now you might get an attorney interested if the case is a good case. Now you might be able to go and hire someone to protect your rights. So those are the kind of things that are important as well. FTC, the 3-day rule, students miss that one all the time. Make sure you know what that is. Make sure you understand the door-to-door nature of that. And if you think about it, it makes sense on what it was designed to protect. High pressure kind of in-person sales that suddenly came to your door. The Postal Reorganization Act. This is one where people think it's too protective. They think that individuals um, shouldn't be entitled to the things that they're entitled to under that act. Make sure you understand that as well. Okay, there's my quick 10 minutes, which turned into 20 to 25 minutes of review. I intended it to be shorter than this. Future ones will probably be shorter than this, but because I think after a while you start to get the hang of this, and I'm not really giving you any true pointers, and I want to make sure that I continue to have value for that. So I'll make these shorter. I will open it up. I did not receive any emails or anything for questions prior to this video. So I don't have anything else specifically to cover. With that having been said, I'll open it up and see if you have questions for me.
Hi, Mr. Cartwright. I actually do have two questions over some of the torts section.
Hmm.
And these are kind of, I guess, weird questions, but I just things that popped in my mind. I have questions about while reading over it. Specifically, the national torts defenses section. In the terms of consent as a defense. So I know that you gave the example of like people who are registered for a boxing match. That's uh, consent ahead of time, so it wouldn't be you wouldn't have a defense there, or you wouldn't be able to like sue for that. What about situations where it's like revoked consent? Does that apply as a law or like in the law?
Well, the question is whether or not consent exists at any moment in time. It's
Mhm.
that's all. Just, you know, if I consent by signing up to a Golden Gloves boxing match, and and the consent form states that none of the participants will be liable for injuring me as a result of any conduct. It will limit it to the actions in the ring, I'm sure, but assume that it did not, and it continued forever and ever and ever, and somebody beat me up 10 years from now. I'm old, but 10 years from now I'll really be old. um, then the question would be, has that consent continued? Well, hopefully I would have revoked that consent prior to that time. That's the whole question. Is there consent that exists at that moment in time? It's a factual question, not a legal one.
Okay, just to clarify on that, because specifically I know like in the news and stuff, you see a lot of cases where in the matter of like personal relations and stuff, you see issues of like consent was revoked in the moment, therefore it was an assault or it was some sort of battery. Would that be applicable?
Yeah, it's just a factual question.
Okay,
It's just a question of fact. Was there consent? Was there not consent?
okay,
The consent has to exist at whatever time the activity took place.
okay. And then one more question, in the same section, if that's okay. The defenses of self-defense and defense of property. I know in Alabama we see a lot of uh, again stuff in the news or issues or cases about um, suspected home invasion or
Yeah,
gun ownership's a big thing here in the South
yeah.
of people very much come on my property on shoot kind of thing. And I know we've seen a lot of cases of that being misused. When does it become self-defense versus defense of property in those situations? Is it a personal, I feel threatened in this moment, whether there or does it have to be an actual real threat, not just a perceived, for it to become self-defense rather than defense of property?
Yeah, it has to be a reasonable threat it has to be perceived as a reasonable threat to the reasonable person. So if you come into my house in the middle of the night, I don't know if you've got a gun or not. A reasonable person would believe their life is in danger. I would be entitled to exercise any and all self-defense rights that may exist. If you come in the middle of the day to my doorstep and you have a slingshot and you're standing on my doorstep behind a door that's locked, and I take my shotgun and I shoot through the window and shoot and kill you, a reasonable person would not have been in fear for their life. That would not be a reasonable exercise of self-defense, and I would be guilty of some homicide that would exist under criminal law.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Sorry about all the questions.
That's what I'm here for. I like questions. I want questions. Do not apologize for that. I should be thanking you for those questions, and I am. And other students should thank you for those questions as well. All right. Any other questions? If not, I will let you go. Y'all have a great weekend and good luck on the next exam. I will, fingers crossed, it'll be a nice, easy one for all of you. And be looking for the next Zoom class or Zoom. I'm gonna call them Zoom open office or something like that in the future. And the reason, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and tell you the reason I did that is I had a student that asked if we were going to be covering all the material for torts. Apparently, at least in one of the sections of the class, the uh, the links weren't working for the original torts video. And fortunately, this student asked me if we were going to be covering all of the things in torts on this Zoom class. The answer to that's always going to be no. But when he asked me that, I was like, wait a minute. And I clicked on it. Sure enough, it had reverted back to the UJA that we used like 2 years ago. I don't know why, but hopefully that won't occur in the future. If it does, somebody please email me right away. If the link doesn't work or something like that on the materials, let me know. I'll fix it. I promise. Anyway, y'all have a good weekend. I'll see y'all when I see you. Bye.